Hi everyone. In this episode of Real Women, Real Wisdom, I'm joined by photojournalist, author, and the pollinator queen herself, Noelle Meade Izzi. We talk about many things in this episode. One of them is about her charming little photo illustrated book called The Hummingbird That Answered My Heart's Calling. And in this book, she explains some spiritual aha moments and important life lessons that helped heal her from a horrible depression due to a financial crisis. Actually, she calls it a crushing financial crisis. And the healing and the life lessons that this cute little hummingbird gave her just by being in her presence outside her window. It's a beautiful book. We also talk about the serious crisis going on with our important pollinators out there, the bees, the birds, the bats, and the butterflies, and the direct impact the loss of these creatures has on our food supply. We talk about the honeybees and the decline of the honeybees and things we can do, all of us, to do our part and participate in protecting our pollinators, the bees, the birds, the bats, and the butterflies. So important to the future of us all. And perhaps at the end of this interview, you too will be inspired to put a hummingbird feeder in your yard. So, in honor of spring and Mother Nature and the beautiful flowers she gives us every year, I dedicate this interview to her, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, Noelle.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me today talking about this wonderful topic, Mother Nature.
Thank you.
I want to get right to it and talk about this beautiful book, The Hummingbird That Answered My Heart's Calling. You got to tell us about this hummingbird and this journey in making this book, this beautiful book. Tell us about it.
Well, the genesis of the experience, I should call it, because it really wasn't meant to be a book at all. It was just my own personal journey of healing. It was during the market crash of 2008, and I had just started my own business. Am still a graphic designer, but I was just starting my own boutique company. I had left a really lucrative corporate career in that area. I thought the timing was right, and it turns out it might not have been until this bird showed up and showed me that to look for the good despite what might appear to be negative. And so I started to experience some really bad panic attacks around the crash. I was watching, like everybody else, houses foreclosed, people losing their job, my parents, their retirement wiped out, and everybody was under this tremendous stress. And so I became part of that energy. I started to experience the what ifs. What if this and what if that, and here I am on my own, starting my own company, just purchased my own house, and what if it all falls apart? And so my body reacted to that negative emotion with anxiety and panic attacks that were debilitating. And if you've ever experienced that, it's frightening at the very least, and you think you're going to die. So,
I know.
yeah. So I went to the doctor, and the good news, the doctor said, was, a panic attack or anxiety attack can't kill you. We can put you on some medication if that's what you want. Well, at that time, I wasn't ready for that. So I thought, well, I think I will just kind of take this and pray, maybe do my own internal healing if I can possibly, do that. Mm-hmm. And so I'd go outside and I'd go for these nature walks, and just kind of like, if it was nighttime, I'd look up at the stars and the moon and, speak to God, the universe, whatever. If it was during the daytime and I'd be watching the trees, I'd speak to the trees,
I'm with you.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Nature was something that was comforting to me in that moment, and at least I could carry that comfort throughout the day until, then nighttime would roll around and I couldn't sleep because of the panic and the anxiety. And when I named the book The Hummingbird That Answered My Heart's Calling a couple years later, when I decided to put this experience together in a cohesive book, that's exactly what had happened. As I prayed, one day, one afternoon, I was out on my balcony and I was sitting on my glider and I looked over and there was this teeny tiny little nest. Now in the book it looks a lot bigger because I did some close-up shots, but if you notice the detail of this nest and the little flowers and the color that this bird integrated, it was just, so I see this thing because it's on a branch hanging over my balcony rail. So she was close enough, or the nest at the time was close enough because the bird wasn't there yet. And so I sat and I just kind of watched and I looked at it and, examined it a little bit, didn't touch it, stayed away. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to just sit here for a little while and see if possibly, this bird shows up. I didn't know what kind of bird it was. Right. And all of a sudden, just zoom, this little teeny tiny bullet shows up, lands in the nest, and I'm like, wow, oh my God, what are you? Who are you? Well, a hummingbird, and as you know, hummingbirds are very elusive. They're
Where do you live?
fast.
What part of the
I live
country?
in Southern California. And so at the time I was living in Valencia, which is about 40 miles north of Los Angeles. It's where I grew up. And it's warm most of the year, so it's not like, the winter, they migrate. A lot of the hummingbirds stay around. But this was definitely springtime and into summer, so it was very prime time no matter where you were. And so she shows up, and I was fascinated immediately. We made eye contact. It sounds woo-woo, but we did. And I felt like, wow, this is really a lovely distraction. And I watched her for a couple hours because she'd fly back and forth, and she would be building her nest. She hadn't laid her egg yet. And I was just so in awe of this little creature.
I love how you say lovely distraction.
Yeah, well, it turned out to be, because this went from that day to 3 months of journaling, of taking pictures, of realizing day, week, month, my panic attacks were gone, my anxiety was dissipating, and before I knew it, I was sleeping through the night. And it was what I realized in retrospect, and as I was experiencing this, that the world doesn't revolve around me. The world doesn't revolve around our problems. If we just open up to everything that we're connected to, we will find good and joy and nectar and sweetness in life. And everything else will sort of fall away when you feel that connection, when you feel that appreciation for the things around you instead of this tunnel vision. And so that was the genesis of the story. That's how it came to be, just the experience.
So this hummingbird must have been an experience. Do you have pets? Do you have dogs, cats?
I do. I've always had dogs and cats in my life. Right now, I am a mother to 2 cats.
And so it's interesting because a lot of us are pet owners of some kind. A lot of us. And we have pets and we tend to them, we care. I mean, my dog, everybody knows, is my soulmate. But it's interesting how even as pet owners, are we taking notice to the wildlife around us? Bugs, spiders. You have the 4 bees, the birds, the bats, and the butterflies. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so so this is this is an experience that you've had with this hummingbird that you named Artemis. So this book, the book itself is kind of the first time I've read something like this. It was part beautiful pictures, close-ups, like you said, of this nest and the birds, and but it's also a narrative. It's like your thoughts, your experience with it. What do you call? What is that? What kind of book genre is that?
I have tagged myself as what I call a Nadu journalist.
Nadu
So,
journalist.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's like a nature journalist. And from the experience of this book is where that came to be, because there are people that are photojournalists, and that was derived from like the wars, where people would go out to the different countries where
Right.
wars were being fought, and they were doing photojournalism
Mm-hmm.
and capturing, really powerful images, and then that told stories.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the same thing, only it's with the natural world around us. So beyond this book, what I do regularly is I'm a wildlife photographer, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of came out of this. And when an animal shows up, as Artemis did,
Mm-hmm.
I believe they're asking me to tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
So I will photograph it, and then as we discussed, the symbolism of animals, animal totems, they teach us so much.
So much.
Yeah, so they relate to us, and therefore that's where the nature Nadu journalism comes in, where the photo kind of has a powerful visual, but then I'm able to tell a story of the relationship between that particular animal and human beings. And that's what totems and spiritual animals are.
Now, in an overall sense, tell us uh, the story of Artemis. What was the what's the story that transpired in front of you in this nest?
Well, it was pretty much first and foremost teaching me what she was relaying to me, I believe, was to sit in the moment. If life around you is really fast and hectic, come out here and join me. And
Mm-hmm.
in our time together, just sit, be still, like I am, because when she would sit in that nest,
Mm-hmm.
it was just still. She was like a little, statue. And relax into the moment and enjoy this time together. And that, first and foremost, that was kind of like almost meditation for me. It was her
That
invitation for
right.
me to go out and sit quietly with her.
Mm.
And then beyond that, as I observed her her physical behaviors, her out and about, collecting nectar, and when she had, the nestling hatched and feeding her baby, I started to really understand this thing of balance that she was teaching,
Mm.
which was every time she went out to collect nectar, she'd come back with this bright yellow bill of pollen. And so I realized, which it kind of goes without saying, it almost seems obvious,
Mm-hmm.
but for most people, when nature is just the backdrop to their everyday, they don't notice these things, so they don't put it together.
Right.
But every time she visited flowers, 50 to 100 of them a day, she would distribute that pollen each time she received the nectar.
Mm-hmm.
The balance of giving and receiving in nature is absolutely flawless and perfect.
It is an amazing design. Who
Mhm.
did that? I don't know, but
Well, it's one of those
it's
things that
amazing.
we humans lose that balance, and we just go tripping into the ether. And that's what happened with the crash. That's what initiated all of this for me personally, is I completely lost my balance, my groundedness, my balance in my thinking. A fear took over, and as I observed her for weeks and months, there was no fear, even in fearful situations. And in the book, I describe the Santa Ana winds that come through
Mm-hmm.
California, and just they're destructive. And I would be more fearful for her as I would watch her, and the nest was just thrashing about at night. And the dawn would emerge, and she
There
would
it
just be
was.
looking at me
And
like,
somehow
what?
this tiny little bird built this sturdy, intricately designed nest. Now, so we've alluded to baby. So Artemis came, and Artemis laid an egg, and Artemis gave birth to a baby. And you watched. Now, what got me? I mean, I told you already that the empty nest part tugged my heartstrings, but the when you describe the feeding, mama baby and the baby waiting, and when you describe the snuggling, oh my god! And as the baby grew, I mean, that had
So
I know
sweet.
that you reference aha moments in the book. Give us, I mean, you got to see the mothering, you got to see life being created. like I said, the empty nest. Oh my God! When Artemis came back, where was the baby? Well, the baby was on the branch because it learned to fly. Let me tell you, this book really good. So tell us some of the most profound aha moments that came to you in this experience.
Um, I would say initially, I don't know if you remember this part specifically, but where I mentioned about like seeking the goodness despite all of the negativity around me.
Yes, yes.
And I remember thinking to myself, she's everything about the hummingbird
Mhm.
symbolically is joy,
Mhm.
playfulness,
Mhm.
sweetness. I mean, they live off nectar. So it's
Yeah.
flowers and beauty.
Oh.
Everything that they get their food from, their food supply, are some of the most beautiful things in the world.
Well, why are they called hummingbirds? Is there a hum?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they sing too, little
Yeah.
entertainers. Wow.
Oh, their hum, it's their wings. I mean,
Oh, the
their
wings
wings
make.
move at, I mean, I can't even, what is it, 200 miles an hour? I
Wow.
mean, so that's why you hear that humming, and they'll actually dive into their nest at, I mean, I want to say 600 miles an hour landing,
Stop
600
it.
mile. I mean, it's literally a bullet. That's why that is the thing about hummingbirds. They're so elusive. They're so fast that you barely get a glimpse of them. And that's why I felt so honored. You know, I remember I would say to her, namaste. I felt so honored to be privy to
Mm,
her and
mm.
this experience because it's not common. They're just crazy.
And you say in the book that you have lots of eye contact with her.
Lots of it. I mean, it's I would just I would look at her and it was almost unnerving. Like, are you looking at me? I'm
Oh,
looking at you.
so
I'm looking at you. Looking at me. We're looking at each other.
oh.
So yeah, the those aha moments of the parallels of,
Mm.
um, I remember as I was watching Baby, and Artemis would be gone, and Baby would be in the nest testing out his wings, and he'd flap, and he'd kind of rest, and then he'd flap again, and it was a little like exhausting. It appeared, and and again in the book I mentioned about anthropomorphizing, which kind of which means putting your human emotions onto that of an animal. So
Yeah, and my
I'm
husband says I
observing
do
this.
that all the time with my dog.
Exactly. And I do too. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that because what it does is it creates empathy.
Yes. It's
And so
love. It's love. It is. It
exactly.
is. It's love.
It's love.
It's
And when
love.
I would see how much that baby wanted to experience his full
Aw.
potential, and then when he did take off and was no longer in the nest, and then Artemis would come and accommodate, just like every mother,
Yes.
as every phase in a child's life, the mothers and father,
Yeah.
they're right there to accommodate each step in their growth. That's exactly what these birds did,
Right.
and
Oh,
that was an aha moment.
you know what got me in the throat? I got all choked up was when you said when Artemis, the mama, found that she came back to the nest and the baby wasn't there, and you were like, ugh. 'Cause I would be
Hmm.
like, oh my God. And
Yeah.
then it saw the baby on the branch nearby and it went to the baby to feed it rather than wait for the baby to come back and
Right.
eat it. And I thought that was so beautiful because she's acknowledging that the baby is growing and acknowledging the different needs of the child, just like every mama.
Exactly. And that was a
Oh,
huge moment for me. And then from that point on, she continued to do that. That baby
oh,
never went back to that
oh,
nest.
right.
Never. He slept in a tree branch. She slept in the tree branch.
Oh,
Every day she'd feed him side by side, just like in the photo.
yep.
And until the day when they both, you know, took off into the, sunset together, and I went out there and they were both gone, and
Oh.
that was just, ooh.
I remember just a little tangent. When I was little, I don't know if you remember Mutual of Omaha,
Oh
Wild
gosh,
Kingdom, right?
yes.
Remember? So my
Yeah.
mom used to make us. I told you they were from. My parents are from India. So
Mhm.
what the animals they're exposed to as a child versus us.
Right.
She had elephants in her house, monkeys, peacocks, right?
Awesome.
But she used to make us watch those Mutual of Omaha, Wild Kingdoms, and she would always hammer, like hammer. See? Look at that mama. That mama doing exactly what I do to you.
Oh, gosh.
She was so connected to, well, you know, she used to say this is the kind of education I want about life I want you to get from the animals, from nature, not from cartoons. I want you, these are the life lessons. She was telling me that
awesome.
The life lessons are out there, you know. So beautiful. So, with this beautiful book, now you become now you're like all about, you know about hummingbirds and you've kind of grown into a passion now, or advocacy, if you will, about pollination and how important it is to the planet, how important it is to all the inhabitants on the planet. Tell us about your passion for spreading the word on pollination, what's happening with us right now, what is the real deal with the bees, and what can we do about it?
Well, from this book and the experience, and wanting to research more in, let's see, 2010, late 2009, I started to read up and research on what was called colony collapse disorder, and it was actually started being recognized in Europe in 2006, whereby they called it the disappearing bee syndrome. And so what was happening is, and is still happening now, is millions of bees, honeybees, are leaving their hive to go forage for the day, what they do naturally, to collect nectar and pollen, and they're just not returning to the hive.
Oh.
Thereby leaving the queen and the drones and all the larvae that's there that need these worker bees to come back and feed the hive and maintain the hive, they all die off too. So you're getting, last year alone, 60 to 100% of hives in the United States died off.
Wait, how many? What?
60 to 100% of hives in the United States alone died off. This is big agriculture. So here's kind of the dichotomy here. Big agriculture, the beekeepers, are using bees to pollinate hundreds of plants. You wouldn't believe, the most nutritious food that they say on the planet is the almond. Honeybees are the primary pollinator of almond trees, and those are everywhere. Watermelon, cherries, apples. Your whole backyard barbecue fruit soiree in the summertime is bees pollinating. And they're dying off. And what we're starting to see, at first, the science wasn't there. The scientists couldn't identify exactly what colony collapse disorder, CCD, what was causing this. There were all kinds of theories, cell phone towers that were messing with the bees' navigation, internal navigation.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that one.
But a lot of these theories kind of fell through, but what they're starting to see, concrete evidence with big agriculture, is the pesticides that are being used. So these pesticides that are being spread throughout the agricultural industry in the United States is what they're showing, that when they go back and they test the hive, they're seeing that the entire hive is tainted with these pesticides and these fungicides.
What about the rest of the world?
All over the world. All over the world in Europe. This is going to be detrimental to the world food supply if we don't do something.
What is the response from the powers that be in response to this? How are people, food supply, what is happening with our food supply because of this?
Well, first of all, we have to be careful what we're eating.
Right.
You're thinking about, okay, so the soil's tainted because they use these pesticides.
Right.
All of the foods that are grown in this soil is tainted, but more than anything, we're running out of the types of foods that the bees are able to pollinate. So you're getting the small amounts of hives that are being maintained are literally being trucked around the United States,
Wow.
hives that they're transporting, which that in and of itself is very hard for me to wrap my head around because it's so disruptive, in my opinion. Scientists and beekeepers can say, no, it doesn't harm the bees when they're being transported in a gigantic semi across, the 10 freeway, across the United States to pollinate this crop of almonds, for example, that's in Central California. I don't know about that. I can't say for sure. I just don't like the disruption of having to transport bees because the other bees that should be in those areas are dying off. So it's just one of those things that, and as you mentioned, we can talk about, like, as we move farther after we talk about what the problem is, what we can do individually to at least support and attract our pollinators in our own garden and have a safe place for them with smart purchasing power. That's it. If anything, if we just get a coalition of the willing, of just us small people,
right.
Not the big genetically modifying food corporations and not big government that's overseeing stuff, but just us little people one at a time.
So this might be a silly question. The genetically modified things, so GMO
Foods.
stuff. Is that in response to, or is that part in response to the crisis with the pollination?
I do believe there is an interconnection, and we're seeing that genetically modified foods are obviously nothing that we want to be eating. From genetically modified seeds to genetically modifying the queen bee,
which is going to continue to get more genetically modified. Everything, right? Is that what is more?
Yeah.
Right. The
right.
more the bees die, the more the need for artificially created food.
Well, and the genetically modified foods like the soy and the corn seeds and all that stuff, those are the pesticides that are destroying the bees are being used in this mass genetically modified time and space we're living in right now. So it's all interconnected. We have to go back to our grassroots. We have to care about what we're being fed. I mean, we have to have people stand up against this. I mean, who wants to eat something that isn't real food?
Right.
I mean,
So it seems like there's like a twofold human benefit to us in what we're talking about. The one is, there's one aspect of this, and that is the relationship with nature itself, between you and any living being out there, and being open to receiving wisdom from our birds and our insects and our animal friends, right? Because there's wisdom there. Then the other side of this is changes we can make, behaviors we can change to support the efforts of our local growers and the organic farmers, and B, create for ourselves in our own space, as natural of an environment as we can.
Right.
And then we can attract, like you were saying in the book. I think it's gorgeous to have, inspiration to give others on, take that backyard of yours and let's turn it into something magical.
Right.
Like a hummingbird feeder, or growing some organic, like having a little garden of herbs and vegetables,
Yeah.
So let's take each one. Let's talk about tips that people can do in their own backyards to attract more birds and hummingbirds, especially. What parts of the country do hummingbirds typically live?
They're pretty much all over.
Depending
on the time of year. So if you're talking about
tell me how to put some in my backyard.
the Midwest. So can you say where you're at?
Yeah, I'm in the East Coast near New York.
Okay.
That area.
All right. Okay. So right now, your hummingbirds that would be migrating back into the United States aren't going to start showing up till around April.
Okay.
Because In the colder states, as opposed to here in California, I have hummingbirds like right now in my periphery. I can see some
Aw.
hummingbirds at my feeder right now, but
Aw.
it's warm most of the time
Right,
throughout the
lucky.
year. So a lot of them don't migrate to their wintering grounds in South America and Mexico. But when they do start coming back and migrating back into the United States, they come in kind of groups. So you'll start seeing where there's a lot of snow and cold, they'll come later on in the spring, and then they'll start moving in across the United States from the south and stay, depending how long it stays warm into the fall. I would recommend whoever puts up feeders, keep them into like early November, because those hummingbirds that are kind of sticking around and not quite sure, am I going to migrate or is it warm enough to stay here all winter long? You want to make sure that they have that nectar, because all of the natural nectar in the flowers will be dormant, at that time.
So your supplement, okay, so tell us about that. What are we putting in this feeder? Sugar, water?
Yeah, sugar and water. So it's called simple syrup. And a lot of people think that you need to get this really elaborate feeder. And you can. I mean, if you want something that's blown glass and all kinds of colors, that's great.
Right.
But there's a misperception that you have to have an overly ornate, colorful feeder in order to attract hummingbirds. And that's not necessarily true. The simplest, I would recommend glass. So there's the base. So the simplest feeder, that's a glass base that has a red base or red bottom with little yellow flowers, that's plastic.
Okay.
Those are you can go to any store, any kind of store, big box store or a small little pet store, and buy those.
Anybody that would have a bird feeder would probably have a hummingbird.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any Petco, anything like that. So and even the big box stores too. In the summertime, they just bring in all kinds of hummingbird feeders because people love that in the summertime.
I'm gonna get one this year.
Yeah. So, and it's wonderful. So then you make the simple syrup, and a lot of people like to get the nectar that's red, that has a red food dye in it. I don't recommend that.
I don't
because
recommend red food dye in anything.
Well, people think, well, it's red, so it's going to attract the hummingbirds. No. Let me tell you something about hummingbirds. They will find your feeder. All you have to do is put it out. They are abundant, they're territorial, they'll find it and they will never leave it until there's no nectar left. They will keep coming back. So they'll find your hummingbird feeder. And if you hang it somewhere near foliage already in your garden where they will see the natural foliage, they'll naturally gravitate to the feeder. So no color food dye in the simple syrup. Just do 1 part water to 1/4 part sugar. So a cup of water and 1/4 cup of just plain sugar. And mix it up and then pour it in there, and they'll be...
And they will be, and the feeder will help the hummingbirds by giving them something to feed their young? Or something to feed that, like what's the sugar water do for them?
It's nourishment.
Nourishment.
I mean,
yeah.
Like anything else, if you and I are going to go eat something, we would much rather have it be organic as opposed to something
fast
made.
Food. Yeah, yeah, no fast food.
Right, no fast food. And so, but this is a way, hummingbirds have such a fast metabolism. And in order for them to maintain the energy level that they need all day long, and then when they go to sleep at night, their heartbeat drops drastically, their blood pressure drops drastically. So they have to have a reserve of this nectar that keeps them alive, if you will. They go into what's called torpor at night. So they'll perch on a branch and they puff up and they literally look dead, but they're not. And then when daytime arrives, they wake up and they fly around. But they need to have a lot of food, a lot of nectar, and the feeders supplement that, especially in the crazy summer months when they're just flying around like mad, and there's thousands of them, in small areas. They need a lot of food to maintain their energy level and their life. So the nectar is a great supplement for that.
Wow.
But when they have a baby like Artemis,
right.
Artemis would rather go get the organic nectar from flowers
Right.
than the feeder. I kept the feeder there just in case,
Did you
but I
ever see
found
her
that
there? Did you ever see her at it?
not when she was nursing. When she
Mm.
was nursing baby, she was out because it was in the heart of spring and summer, so the flowers were everywhere.
Everywhere.
I'd see her out, in
Where's
flowers.
the what? How long is the nest still there? Did other birds come and use it? Has it gone? The nest
Um,
itself?
I don't live there
Oh, you
anymore,
don't live there anymore. Okay.
but the nest, this was kind of creepy, and I didn't want to interfere.
Oh.
So I just kind of let it be. Now, I do know that hummingbirds will go back to the same place and re-nest
Right.
that they have a year prior, unless the nest isn't there. Artemis's nest, after baby and Artemis left, I would say about 3 weeks later, this gigantic grasshopper
Yeah.
came and was like, he would perch himself underneath the nest, and then I don't know what he was doing, but he was kind of pulling away at it.
Interesting.
And yeah, and eventually, and this grasshopper, I'm telling you, was like 2 inches long. He was gigantic.
Ugh.
And, it was like, ooh, that is just really weird, but okay, I'm just gonna let nature do its thing, because maybe there was something like from the egg, or like when baby was, that maybe there was something in there that he was eating,
Yeah.
or, and so
How long did you witness this? How long was it? Like a couple of days, or
the
grasshopper?
Yeah, I would say it was about a week that I would see him going back, and I think he'd be gone, and then and then he'd come back. So true. But, again, it was one of those things like, oh, I could preserve this nest and go, ooh, get off of there, or I could just let nature do what it does. And so,
Yeah, well, ultimately that's Mama Nature knows but she's
Exactly.
talking. I love in your book, the prologue. I have it highlighted on my notes here, and I just want to read it. It's such a beautiful, this book we're talking about with Artemis. I like it says in the prologue, the story is a wondrous encounter that brings to light the parallels between nature and humans. It is a story that demonstrates the pervasive interconnectedness between all of nature. I just love that. That's so true. And so you mentioned animal totems. I'm somebody that pays attention, but I didn't always. But when you start paying attention, you start receiving so many messages. You get a lot of guidance.
Yeah.
And so I'm somebody that, pays attention to what animals are showing themselves to me. And I have done a lot of research online, what Native Americans, symbolize different animals and such. And over a period of time, I can say it makes sense. It makes sense when you are have an experience with nature, especially an animal, bird, insect. A 2-inch grasshopper is an experience.
Yeah.
Right? It makes sense. We're all communicating to each other all the time. And so, to wrap this up, I want to talk about spiritual pollination. How we can be spiritual pollinators. And this is the part that I like, because it really is a lot we are empowered individually to do to help this planet. We really do have easy, simple things we can all do to give love to this planet. And you had some great ones to talk about in all of this, helping. What can we do about the pollination crisis? What can we do to attract more nature in our backyard? What can we do to eat? How do we give us some of that? Because I think that is a very valuable wisdom to impart here.
Well, first and foremost, just be conscientious of your purchasing. So
Right.
if we're going to talk about just that for our pollinators, be conscientious. Spiritual pollination, though, isn't as much as the tangible things like make sure you shop locally for your honey. Make sure that you don't purchase Roundup, the pesticide, for your backyard. You don't want to use Roundup or any of those things, because it's literally killing the pollinators that are coming into your garden, you know.
And there are
So
much better options, natural
absolutely.
options, right? Okay.
Absolutely. So go to nursery and speak to them and ask the options, because anybody that's into horticulture, and that's why I say if you go to farmers markets, if you go to your nurseries instead of the big box stores, they care. They're informed of what's going on
Right.
with all of this crisis. But spiritual pollination has a lot to do with what we're thinking, the power of our energy, because I get people that say, there's nothing I can do about the factory farming. There's nothing I can do about the dolphins that are in Japan being slaughtered. I can't be there, but I tell you, you can be there. You can be there in your energetic signature. When you want to support the cows in the factory farm. Okay, so for example, I've had someone say to me, I can't be a vegetarian. My family can't be vegetarian. We do have to eat meat because I've got 3 teenage boys that are growing, and their body, they tell me, they crave that.
Right.
Okay, so I can't walk around judging people. We are who we are, and we're in a time and space on Earth in where we're at.
Right.
Okay, so accept that. But when you sit down to eat that meal, all I would ask of that family is take one moment out of before you dig into that meal and just say thank you.
Yes.
Stop and say thank you. And this is what I do. I even do it with my potato. Thank you, Mother Earth, for this potato. Mm-hmm. Thank you to the animal that has given its life force for my meal. That matters a lot. That makes a difference because it is a vibration.
Yes.
That is being sent out globally.
Yes.
And that is what they call the critical mass. We can make a difference with what we're thinking and feeling. We really can. That is spiritual pollination. Not feeding into the anger on social media. You go in and you see a post of, say, something that's happening with an animal that you love, and the first thing you see is someone typing in, man, if I could get a hold of that guy that did that, I'd string him up by a da-da-da and hang him by his toes, and so you're feeding into that negativity.
Right.
Instead, say a prayer for the human that is engaging in something that isn't for the well-being of anything, and say a prayer for the animal. That is spiritual pollination. You know what I mean?
I do.
Teach your children.
Native Americans are the they honored everything that they used.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that was used to survive was they were grateful for.
Yes.
They honored their and that's beautiful. Actually, I had to sit with that one because that's just gratitude.
Yeah, and it's honoring the life force,
honoring
everything.
Mother Nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about it is easy to get organic food, right? You can grow it. You can get organic seeds. I just bought some organic parsley and organic cilantro. It was like $2 for a packet of seeds.
Mm-hmm.
They were organic. Organic. What kind of pesticides are? What kind of alternatives exist?
Well,
for that?
You would have to probably talk to. One of the things when we talk about the power pollinators, one pollinator that doesn't get a whole lot of media attention, except for, say, a little bit of negative media attention through the movies, is our bats. Okay. So bats are the night shift. So all during the day, you've got the butterflies, the birds, and the bees that are pollinating all throughout the daytime. But when they go to bed at night, the bats are what pick up the night shift. And they pollinate during the nighttime.
And how they pollinate?
Huge.
They actually take from the flowers. Bats go to flower? I didn't know that.
They pollinate, agave?
Yes.
Are you familiar with agave? Agave is huge. People
Tequila.
are using... Thank you. I always want to say, if you like your tequila, you need to protect the bats. The bats are also in decline.
Really?
Oh, huge. Yeah, that is their plant, is agave nectar. So
I did not
our,
know that.
besides another 400 types of like very tropical plants, but agave nectar is one of the main crops that bats pollinate.
I did not know
And
that.
bats' greatest adversary are human beings and fear. That combination is a lethal combination for bats. You have people that go into bat caves and set them on fire because
No.
of the fear that people have about bats. Because, and this is another thing
Oh
about
my God.
teach our children,
Yeah.
it might be fun to go watch a movie that talks about vampires and
Yes.
humans that used to be bats and turn into human vampires.
Right.
I understand that that's a great entertainment and kind of cool, but we then have to go back and we have to teach our children the real story
It's like
of
my
bats.
mother, Mutual of Omaha.
Exactly. Because if they go through life being misguided through
Yeah.
the entertainment industry of something that is entertaining, okay,
Right.
but don't understand the value of a bat,
Right.
they're going to go
I didn't
and,
know that. Every time I
yeah,
have a margarita,
just say thank you.
thank you for the bats. Wow.
Yes, thank you to the bats that provide, thank you to Mother Earth. There's
Wow.
a reason, and you know this,
Mhm.
everything has a purpose.
Mhm.
Everything is willing to give
Mhm.
and be a guest on this planet to give and receive in balance. And the bats are another one. So we have to protect our bats. We're losing our bats.
I did not.
Yeah.
I know in Austin, Texas, there's a lot of bats. Did you ever go there, Austin?
No, I've never
There's
been
like
to
this.
Austin.
There's this like park. It's famous because at sunset, like all the
They
bats
come
come flying out. Yeah.
out. They're
I didn't
amazing.
know
They're
that. Yeah.
amazing little
So
creatures.
bats are pollinators. So
Yeah,
I
huge.
can't. I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one who learned that today. I didn't really know bats
Yeah.
were
A lot of
pollinators.
people don't. So that's one of the things that I love that information because the obvious are the bees and the birds
Yes.
and the butterflies, but the
Yes.
bat is just huge in our pollination. And they really are precious. And by the way, the vampire bat
Oh.
is a small percentage and they only feed off blood of cattle. And it's not like they go and suck it and the cattle die or anything like that. It's part of the nutrient and the protein that they need. They never touch people in that way. And of course you have to
Oh.
bats can carry rabies, so you don't want to be wandering around and
Right.
in a cave, but you don't want to destroy anything because
Right. Of course
everything is
not.
part of the
Right.
whole.
I think to sum this all up, because that's a great point, right? The bees, the I shouldn't say bees because it's bees, butterflies, bats, and birds. The pollination crisis, and it is a crisis because there's decline and then there's oh my God, what's going on, right? And
Right.
it's catastrophic. If that's not a in-your-face message of how we're all connected, because that bee that I'm afraid of, I'll be honest, I see a bee, I go in the other direction. I don't want to get stung. But, oh my God, to think about not having any bees,
I know.
I mean, the food, right?
Yeah.
How much more real does it have to be? It's so, and while this Mother Nature is so robust and so brilliant in its design, it's also very fragile.
Oh gosh, and I love that word, and that's exactly what it is. It's fragile, and interesting enough, people do. There's a fear of bees, and I understand.
I
I'm not
do.
one that's saying, oh my gosh, but just remember that when a bee stings somebody, it gives its life. It doesn't sting you and fly away and live. It stings you and dies. So
And why does it sting?
it just feels threatened. Most of the time, if you're in
Ah.
a place, animals, and I think you would relate to this. Animals take fear as
Oh,
as
man.
threatening because they we say, oh, dogs can sense fear.
Right.
Horses are equine. These horses are used to help people get over things that have gone on emotionally in
I
their
know
lives.
this
Animals
therapeutic.
do
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm
So they
laughing
do
because
feel that.
bees, I must be the biggest target in the world because I'm the one who screams.
Well, and so they take that as a sign of aggression when they can feel. I mean, I'm not saying be silly and walk into a beehive and go, "Oh, okay, well, I love you. But to be so fearful and swat them, that's a
Yes.
sign of aggression. Your fear is a sign of aggression. I like to just go out, and if there's bees in my vicinity and they're foraging on flowers, I just say a little prayer, if you will, and I just say, welcome. Namaste, which means, the God in me or whatever, the universe in me honors the universe in you.
It's the best
So,
word on the planet. I love that word.
yeah. So, and they feel that. I do. I believe they feel it.
Well, I may not be ready to be over for my fear of bees, but you know what I would say if I see bee? I'm going to say thank you for being alive, bee.
Yes.
Thank you for being around. Wow. And then the one last thing I want to say is I hope that people, when they read this book and they look at the beautiful pictures, I hope that they open up to having relationships like you had with Artemis. Because that's a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
There was a third space created between you and that bird. You had it. You had a relationship. And
Yeah.
the wisdom, you gained wisdom, which is awesome. It's so beautiful. So I want to thank you so much. It's probably one of the most beautiful topics we could ever talk about.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. And the book, say the name of the book one more time for me. I just think it's the best book title ever.
The Hummingbird That Answered My Heart's Calling.
That answered your heart's calling.
Mm-hmm. And she did.
And she did. And keep doing what you're doing. Do you have any new what is it? Say the word again.
Natto journalism.
I can't say that word. Natu journalism.
Yeah.
NATU journalism. Do
Yeah.
you have any other?
Well, you can go on my website. I have a huge blog of like the photographs I take, and then the blogs that I write alongside of them, and it's all that. That's exactly what the Natu journalism is that I participate.
We'll provide that for everybody so they
Okay.
can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was really nice talking
Really
to you.
nice.